Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. Before we begin, I want to give a mention to Sister Lisa Cabrera. There's not many people who I actually listen to on the internet, and she's one of the new voices of black media who I've recommended to you in the past, along with Tarian Rain, Your World, and a select few others. She's already posted a video on the subject of this morning's briefing, and her take is more than worth checking out if you haven't already. Today, I'll be giving my view. Politico, a white media publication, has a fraudulent headline: Jim Clyburn, America's favorite sharecropper, saved Biden's campaign in 2020. They actually have the nerve to put that in print. Actually, Clyburn was attacking and insulting the people who actually did save Biden's worthless behind.
This foolishness about you got to be this progressive or that progressive, that phrase, defund the police, cost Jamie Harrison tremendously.
If you could have a caucus meeting right now and you would, or tell folks what they should do differently, given the losses that we have, what would you say to them?
Stop sloganeering. Sloganeering kills people. Sloganeering destroys movements. Stop sloganeering.
Stop sloganizing. Stop sloganizing. Sloganizing kills. No, supporting politicians who sit on their hands while black people are gunned down in the street by race soldiers. That's what kills. And that's what Clyburn's always done. This asinine narrative by the white media that this safe pet Negro somehow is the most important black politician in America. He's the most useful puppet that white power has in America. But he's hardly influential. Remember, James Clyburn put all of his little influence behind Jamie Harrison back in 2020. And although Biden and Raphael Warnock won handily due to black support, it was nigga Jim Clyburn's own handpicked flunky Jamie Harrison who lost his race. The only person who supported that clown was Jim Clyburn, and he lost. And who did Clyburn blame for that? The young black voters who were demanding that these domestic terrorist organizations calling themselves the police be defunded. Now, if James Clyburn was so influential, why did his boy lose? It's because he's no kingmaker, but the white media has lies that they need to prop up, so here we go. And Politico's article has a sub-headline: Representative Jim Clyburn doesn't think black voters are really swinging toward Trump. Okay, Captain Obvious, do you want us to give you a prize for that little bit of wisdom? That crap about black voters supposedly swinging towards Trump, that's been a white media lie for the last 3 years at least, as they've seen that Biden hasn't been able to hold on to that black support from 2020. Black voters very quickly became soured on him when it was obvious he had pulled just another con game. Now, I in particular have been beating the drum nonstop against that white media rhetoric about black voters are turning to Trump because the white media is terrified to admit the truth. Black voters are turning their backs on Biden because he offered us nothing and he's done nothing for us. And here the white media is, years after the fact, acting like this old sharecropping bastard is revealing some sort of heretofore unknown truth about the black vote. Once again, family, if you're not following the black media, you'll always be the last to know. These stories you see from the white media are mostly the media equivalent of comfort food for racists. Young black voters are starting to sour the little hustle that the Jim Clyburns and Joe Bidens have had going, so they need to convince themselves that the house of cards that white power sits on isn't really being threatened by these young black voters. They have to convince themselves that their army of bootlicks can keep us under control. Whenever they see us pushing back, they start screaming that somebody has to stop these extremists on the left. Yeah, when you live under a system that's totally and completely corrupt and dirty, merely demanding an ounce of justice is extremism. Well, as Malcolm X said when he threw Barry Goldwater's words back in his face,
I don't believe in any form of unjustified extremism. But I believe that when a man is exercising extremism, a human being is exercising extremism in defense of liberty for human beings, it's no vice. And when one is moderate in the pursuit of justice for human beings, I say he's a sinner. The day that the black man takes an uncompromising step and realizes that he's within his rights, when his own freedom is being jeopardized, to use any means necessary to bring about his freedom or put a halt to that injustice, I don't think he'll be by himself. I honestly believe that the day that they do, many whites will have more respect for them, and that there will be more whites on their side than are now on their side with these little wishy-washy love thy enemy approach that they've been using up to now.
But Politico's not the only ones out here quaking in their boots. You got other publications like The Hill. They're posting pieces saying that James Clyburn's trying to get these young black voters in line, having these old Negroes talk to us. Jim Clyburn says it's time to talk some sense into the younger black generation. This is the propaganda that the white media is carpet bombing us with, saying that Jim Clyburn's going to get these old heads to get us back in line. The Biden campaign co-chair believes black parents should be responsible for convincing black youth to vote for Biden. Well, I don't know how to break it to old nigga Jim Clyburn, but the black parents are no longer the black baby boomers. If you look at what Gen Z is doing, those are the children of Generation X. And the millennials, they ain't listening to the Jim Clyburns either. He's talking to the wrong black parents. But then again, when you're as behind the curve as their sharecropper, is it any surprise that he can't keep up? Jim Clyburn is part of the black baby boomers, and they have no credibility with anyone. You can't talk sense to somebody when you don't have any sense to begin with. This is that old plantation talk that he's doing.
Don't worry, massa. I'll go talk them unruly field hands into going back and picking the cotton for you. Yassa, massa. I'm your boy.
James Clyburn has made an entire career out of using literal plantation politics to get black people to vote. And the crown jewel of this condescending politics that he likes to peddle has to be his infamous annual catfish cookout. I wish I was making that up. James Clyburn literally has a cookout to get black folks to vote, and apparently for a lot of those Negroes out there, where he lives at least, that's enough for them to go and do it. Those Negroes out there aren't demanding reparations for their vote. They're demanding a 2-piece and fries. That is pathetic. But Clyburn's proud of that. He's proud of the fact that he can get high office for the cost of a lunch plate special at the local Greasy Spoon Diner. And this is what Clyburn's white paymasters are also doing, trying to get our vote without actually having to give us anything for it. This is why the black vote isn't respected, and that disrespect quickly turns into out-and-out abuse. Young black voters don't want to be like these olders. Elders are supposed to be producing something to benefit the young. That's how elders earn the title of elders. They earn it through respect, but they got to produce to get that respect. Decrepit, self-interested relics like Clyburn, they don't want to do anything for anyone but themselves. The black baby boomers had the advantage of inadvertently being young and growing up during the post-World War II economy, back when the U.S. had an unparalleled economic edge over the rest of the industrialized world, which had been bombed to hell during the war. America convinced itself that its economic might was solely due to the quality of its work and its goods. And while it's true that U.S. products and services were certainly of better quality 65 years ago than they are today, it's also true that as the rest of the world began to rebuild and eventually come back online again, the U.S. simultaneously began to see its economic position erode. This was the economic situation that black baby boomers grew up in, and by the end of the 1970s, the party was over. The baby boomers were in their 20s and 30s by then. Many of them were working at jobs made possible by the Civil Rights Act and other legislation, and they enjoyed all of these benefits during an economy that was far stronger than the one that Generation X and the millennials would grow into. See, the black baby boomers could afford to wear blinders, or at least not face up to the realities of the world. They had government jobs and token corporate jobs. Generation X, millennials, and Gen Zers, on the other hand, are under no such illusions. We're not about to have any senile failures lecture us on anything. And please tell me, who the hell is going to listen to Jim Clyburn? Even the Democrats don't listen to this clown. Clyburn says that these old heads like himself, they need to convince us to vote for Biden. By the way, did I tell you that Jim Clyburn is Joe Biden's campaign chair? Now, 4 years ago, when young black voters were making their demands to Clyburn known, he was the one who led the charge to insult them and tell them to shut up. And now here this moron is 4 years later, still thinking that he's in some sort of position to be barking out orders. See, there's that old age again. Joe Biden's not the only politician who's gone senile. They keep recycling the same failed moves because white supremacy doesn't have any new plays in the playbook. They just keep doing the same thing, only more of it. And they depend on black people having short memories because too many of us do, or counting on us losing our resolve because too many of us do, or otherwise losing interest in holding our ground because history has shown that too many of us do. You have these white supremacists on the left who are conducting a joint chorus of complaint with their hand-picked Negro bootlicks like Clyburn, and then they wonder why nobody outside their circle of stupidity listens to them. White power has set up its gang of safe, docile, obedient Negroes who they know aren't going to question them or challenge them. They'll just sit there like a potted plant and nod their empty heads. Well, thanks to our efforts, more and more younger black voters aren't. The young black people today are acting like a serious constituency, or at least they're starting to, and that means big trouble for the Jim Clyburns of this world, because they're not going to be able to come along this time and recycle the old talking point, orange man bad. As I told you 4 years ago, that's a trick that they only get to pull one time. Now Clyburn says the problem is one of messaging. That's what he says. That's how you know this fool's completely and thoroughly out of touch. No, the problem isn't the message. The problem is one of substance. Biden isn't going to sloganize his way out of this one. They've done crap like get your booty to the polls and other garbage. They know that they can't send out losers like Clyburn to talk to us. The under 50 black voters don't respect chumps like him, and they won't listen to him. And they won't listen to these hand-picked pork chop preachers either. So good luck trotting out the Al Sharptons or the Messy Jessies or any of these would-be heir apparents like William Barber or Michael Eric Dyson. The day of thinking all you got to do is have some pulpit pimp come out and shuck and jive for us and do their preacher man routine and the Negroes will predictably fall in line, that day is over. Hell, even if they did magically stumble upon a better message, it still wouldn't help them because black people don't trust the messengers. The white media has spent the last decade now trying to manufacture their own safe, phony versions of the new black media, hand-picked puppets who white power selects and then tries to crown them as being the black voice or black leaders or whatever. And their strategy has failed because, as I've told you, white power can give you a platform, but what they can't give you is legitimacy. And speaking of illegitimate, whenever some fool talks about how the Democrats' problem is messaging, I can't help but remember how Roly-Poly Martin runs around saying that Democrats need to hire me to do the messaging for them. Y'all don't know what black folks want to hear. Well, he doesn't know either. This cable news cast-off has got the pulse of the young people, right? Well, how come his candidates keep losing? Yeah, Roly-Poly's a tool, all right, but he's the wrong tool for the job. Trying to bluff their way past us and use fear-mongering and other rhetorical tricks isn't proving to be effective this time around. The reason that the black vote is turning against Biden is because he already made it clear he's turned against us. We just had the latest example where the survivors of the Tulsa Race Massacre had their case rejected by the courts yet again for no reason. Biden said that he had black people's backs 4 years ago, but he's been MIA on this one, and so is the rest of his administration. Now, when the police wanted to have legal immunity from denying people their Miranda rights, Biden personally sent his own Solicitor General to go to the Supreme Court to offer an amicus brief on behalf of the police to support the thugs in blue, so that they don't have to be sued whenever they deny people their Miranda rights. Kamala Harris went to the Edmund Pettus Bridge this year and used that as a platform for a PR stunt meant to pacify the anti-war left because they don't like Biden funding Israel's war machine. But she said absolutely nothing about the Tulsa Race Massacre victims or anything else meant to get us justice for the wrongs that we've endured. So, Biden and his pals, they'll go to the mat for everyone else, including those who harm us. But for black people, crickets. Biden's Justice Department has done nothing and said nothing to support the black people whose civil rights were being unquestionably trampled on in Tulsa or anywhere else. And Biden doesn't dare say a word on the Tulsa Race Massacre's victims' behalf either, because he knows to do that would open the door to a conversation on reparations. And he's not about to do that. And you know who else won't dare do that either? Jim Clyburn. This shuffling, buck-dancing Mr. Bojangles. If you thought that he was indignant at young black people for demanding the police be punished, what do you think goes through that empty melon on his shoulders when you tell him he needs to publicly advocate for reparations? You had people like Brother Marcel who confronted James Clyburn directly on that, and James Clyburn started with the whataboutisms. And I ain't got time for this. And why y'all coming at me? Nah, he didn't say, you know what? I'm going to step up for reparations right now. He didn't even say, well, I've always stood for reparations. He said, why y'all coming at me? That's what he said. James Clyburn is a sock puppet for white power. He and his worthless daughter, who I've told you about, she was a commissioner on the FCC because of her father's influence. And then when she left the FCC, she immediately got put on the payroll of the very communications companies that she was allegedly regulating. But I'm sure that was just one big happy coincidence. Negroes like Jim Clyburn see themselves as a black overseer class for massa. He knows what his real job is, to show white power that he can keep the rest of us in line. Biden's refusal to publicly stand up for the Tulsa race massacre victims shows you precisely why young black people aren't supporting him today and shouldn't have supported him in 2020. The generation who endured the race massacres were the parents and grandparents of the black baby boomers, the Jim Clyburns, that is. And yet, if you're a black Gen Xer or younger, you don't hear these baby boomers talking about these genocides, do you? They were too busy trying to style and profile and looking for interracial sexual access. That's what they were doing in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. People like John Lewis and Jim Clyburn were looking to use the civil rights movement as a springboard to a career in politics for themselves, so that they could finally get some of that sweet political campaign money that they had seen the white politicians getting. That's the reason that they wanted to get into politics so badly. The black baby boomers like Clyburn turned their backs on these genocides. They turned their backs on their own parents and grandparents. These old Negroes out here should be ashamed of that. They should be too ashamed to show their faces, much less run their mouths. They should have been the ones leading the charge to get justice for their parents and grandparents, but instead it fell to Generation X and the millennials to go back and remind this country of the crimes that it tried to bury. And Jim Clyburn thinks the young black voters are going to listen to these turncoat fossils like himself? Don't dream. This is what happens when you spend decades inside a white media bubble, where you have the white media pretending to fawn over you and claiming that you're the most influential black whatever in America. They give you a couple of token phony headlines claiming that you're so powerful, they put you on a few of their Sunday morning news shows, and before you know it, you start to believe their propaganda. But the black street knows better than that, and the black street never forgets. That's why Biden's black voter support has collapsed. Because there's a black media out here who's not letting black people forget about his broken promises and his lies. We're not letting it fall down the memory hole. Clyburn and the rest of these other bootlicks, they know exactly what we've been saying and why we're putting our foot down, but they don't dare actually talk about it because that would be political suicide for them. They can't deny what we're saying is true. So instead, they try to see if they can get away with empty rhetoric about how Biden's done things for black folks. Though you notice they can never tell you what these things are. And they claim that any complaints that we're making, well, that's just disinformation. See, the reality is Jim Clyburn is in grieving. He's grieving because he's looking down the barrel of the loss of his political power. And he knows that when white power is done with its tools, it breaks its tools. If he can't convince us to stay on the plantation, white power doesn't need him anymore, and he knows MSNBC's not going to offer him a weekend show. So he's already grieving the end of his power and privilege. And as we all know, denial is the first stage of grief, and he's heavy in the denial. He's trying to wish us away, claiming that we're just disinformation. Yeah, Joy Reid tried that one 4 years ago, calling us Russian bots. I guess they figured that they'd use that talking point again. See, they know a lot of black people are prone to believe conspiracy theories, largely because we have legitimately been the targets of so many conspiracies, from the kind of people that Jim Clyburn likes to bump elbows with. So they're hoping that if they can sneakily infer that the black media is somehow part of a conspiracy, that will make some mushy-headed gullible Negroes think that demanding something for our vote is also part of a conspiracy, when in reality Jim Clyburn represents the 21st century COINTELPRO. The only one who can suppress the black vote are the Democrats. As long as they continue to offer us nothing, as long as they continue to ignore us, then there is no reason for us to turn out to vote, at least not for them. And what will they do without black votes? Well, in the case of Jim Clyburn, he'd be reduced to actually having to go and get a real job. Not that anyone would be willing to hire him. So these scumbags hear us and they fear us, and they should. We're not here to disrupt the status quo. We're here to dismantle it and replace it with a system of justice. And what is justice? Black empowerment. Jim Clyburn isn't scared that black voters are going to begin listening to Trump. That's not going to happen. But what he is scared of is that there's a young generation now who won't listen to Jim Clyburn. His goal is to get his worthless kids into politics and hand them his congressional seat, and he hopes his political power, such as it is. The same way that the Kennedys did. That's how Jim Clyburn sees himself. He thinks of himself as a southern version of the Kennedys. We like the Kennedys over here. He wants to pass his political office down from father to child like some perverted family heirloom. But he needs black people if he's going to pull that one off. And that requires him to get black people to overlook the fact that his district is one of the poorest in America. And for some reason, that doesn't bother Jim Clyburn at all. And it doesn't bother Joe Biden either. But it bothers young black voters. That's why the Democrats and the white media keep carpet bombing us with this tsunami of propaganda and phony talking points. They hope that if they do it long enough, some Negroes will start to get weak-willed or lose their resolve. And while it's true that there's some watered-down, spineless cowards who will flake off, it's also true that what we're doing represents the actual sentiment of the black vote. We represent what the future of the black vote is going to be. We're not represented by a white media bankroll. We're represented by the black consensus. Clyburn and the white media are terrified of that, and they should be. Their fear isn't that black voters are turning towards Trump. What terrifies Clyburn is that black voters are at long last turning inward. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: Yasharon Heron, Jacques Hargett, Jamal Isaac, Wesley Watkins, and Samuel Divers. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.